I'm Lillian, 34, and a single mom to my 7-year-old son Noah, who battles chronic asthma. Growing up with emotionally neglectful parents shaped me to be fiercely independent, but that Friday morning changed everything. When Noah woke up wheezing, I desperately called my parents to watch him during my career-changing promotion meeting. Their response still echoes in my mind: "We're not willing to sacrifice our weekend plans." I had to choose between my child and financial stability for us both. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to choose between your child and your career. Your support means the world to me. My relationship with my parents, Martha and Robert, has always been complicated. From my earliest memories, they made it clear that their needs and social status took priority over everything else, including me. They weren't physically abusive, but the emotional neglect left scars that I'm still healing from decades later. Growing up in our suburban home in Minneapolis, I quickly learned that disappointment was the default expectation when it came to my parents. My 5th-grade piano recital that I practiced months for, they missed it because Martha's book club rescheduled. My 16th birthday. They forgot entirely until 3 days later when I finally mentioned it. The pattern was consistent and clear. I simply wasn't a priority. "Lillian, you're being too sensitive," my mother would say whenever I expressed hurt feelings. "We provide you with food, clothing, and a roof over your head. What more do you want?" What I wanted, of course, was to feel loved and important. Instead, I became fiercely self-sufficient out of necessity. By 14, I was cooking my own meals, doing my own laundry, and essentially parenting myself. I maintained straight A's not because they cared about my education, but because it meant they didn't have to be involved with school matters. The emotional void at home led me to seek connection elsewhere. In high school, I met Jake, charming, attentive, and the first person who seemed to truly see me. His family welcomed me into their home, showing me what genuine family warmth felt like. When he looked at me with those intense brown eyes and told me I mattered, I believed him with every fiber of my being. Looking back, our relationship moved too fast, fueled by my desperate need for belonging. At 19, during my freshman year of community college, I discovered I was pregnant. When I told Jake, expecting him to embody the stability I'd always craved, he disappeared instead. No calls, no texts, blocked on social media, just gone as if our 2 years together had meant nothing. Terrified and alone, I had no choice but to tell my parents. Their reaction was exactly what I'd expected. "Well, this is certainly going to complicate things," my mother said with a sigh, as if I'd announced a minor inconvenience rather than a life-changing event. "I suppose this means you'll be dropping out of school." "We're disappointed, Lillian," my father added, his focus never leaving the financial section of the newspaper. "But not surprised. You've always been impulsive." When I tearfully asked if I could move back home temporarily, they exchanged a look I'd seen many times, the one that said they were calculating the minimum effort required. "I suppose you can use the guest room until you figure something out," my mother finally conceded. "But we're not running a charity. You'll need to contribute to expenses, and we're not built-in babysitters." Even in my most vulnerable moment, their support came with conditions, scorekeeping, and clear boundaries around their inconvenience. Still, I had few options, so I accepted their terms and moved into their guest room. The next several years were a blur of exhaustion. I gave birth to Noah, a beautiful boy with my dark hair and Jake's expressive eyes. Against my parents' predictions, I didn't drop out of school. Instead, I took a reduced course load, working evenings at a local restaurant and weekends at a retail store while attending classes when my parents would reluctantly watch Noah, always with commentary about how I was complicating their retirement plans. Every milestone was a battle. When I finally graduated with my business administration degree after 5 years of part-time study, my mother's primary concern was whether the ceremony would interfere with their summer vacation plans. When I landed my first office job as an administrative assistant, my father remarked that secretarial work wasn't much to show for a college degree. Despite everything, I managed to save enough for a security deposit on a small one-bedroom apartment about 20 minutes from my parents' home. Noah and I shared the bedroom while I converted part of the living room into a small workspace. It wasn't much, but it was ours, and for the first time I could breathe without the constant weight of my parents' judgment. Yet the proximity was intentional. despite their emotional shortcomings, they were still Noah's only grandparents. And practically speaking, I occasionally needed their help with childcare. Help that always came with complaints, criticism, and the clear message that they were doing me an enormous favor. "You know, Lillian," my mother would say while dropping Noah off after watching him, "most grandparents just get to enjoy their grandchildren. They don't have to raise them because their daughters made poor choices." Each comment stung, but I smiled and thanked them anyway. What choice did I have? Single parenting left little room for pride, and Noah deserved whatever family connections were available to him, even if they were deeply flawed. Little did I know that their conditional support would soon force me into an impossible choice, one that would finally push me to redefine what family truly means. Noah was diagnosed with severe asthma just after his third birthday. What started as what we thought was a persistent cold turned into a terrifying night in the emergency room, with my little boy struggling to breathe while doctors worked to open his airways. "Your son has asthma, Ms. Walker," the doctor explained, handing me a stack of prescriptions and informational pamphlets. "This isn't uncommon in children, but Noah's case appears to be on the severe end of the spectrum. You'll need to be vigilant about his triggers and medication schedule." That night began our journey with nebulizer treatments, inhalers, emergency action plans, and the constant vigilance that comes with parenting a child with a chronic health condition. The financial burden was immediate and overwhelming. Even with my company's health insurance, the copays and medication costs quickly consumed the small savings I'd managed to build. Despite his health challenges, Noah grew into a bright, creative, and resilient little boy. With his unruly dark curls and thoughtful brown eyes, he had a way of making friends wherever we went. He loved dinosaurs, could spend hours creating elaborate Lego structures, and had recently started showing an impressive talent for drawing. His kindergarten teacher described him as an old soul, perceptive beyond his years and unusually empathetic toward other children. "Mom Ellie was sad at recess today because she forgot her snack," he'd tell me, "so I shared my apple slices with her." These moments of compassion always filled me with a bittersweet pride. I was raising a kind human being, one who instinctively offered the emotional generosity that my own parents had never shown me. Yet, I couldn't help wondering if his empathy came partly from witnessing my struggles, if he'd learned to be attuned to others' needs because he'd seen his mother's vulnerability too often. Our daily routine was a carefully orchestrated ballet of timing and logistics. Up at 5:30 a.m. for Noah's morning nebulizer treatment, while I packed lunches and laid out clothes. Breakfast by 6:45, out the door by 7:15 to drop Noah at before-school care. Then a 30-minute commute to my job at Summit Marketing Group, where I'd been working as an administrative assistant for the past 5 years. After work, I'd rush to pick up Noah by 6:00 p.m. to avoid late fees, then home for dinner, homework, evening medications, bath, and bedtime. Only after Noah was asleep around 8:30 would I have time to tackle laundry bills, meal prep for the next day, and if I was lucky, 30 minutes to myself before collapsing into bed to start again the next day. This relentless schedule left no room for error, which is why I'd carefully cultivated a small support network. Mrs. Rodriguez, our elderly neighbor who treated Noah like a grandson, would occasionally watch him for a few hours on weekends. Amber, a coworker with children of her own, had become a friend and emergency backup for school pickups. And despite their complaints, my parents would sometimes agree to have Noah for a few hours, though they made it clear this was an imposition. "You know we raised our child already," my father would remind me whenever I called with a childcare request. "We're supposed to be enjoying our retirement, not starting over with parenting." Noah's relationship with his grandparents was complicated. He craved their approval and attention, but even at 7, he had begun to notice their emotional withholding. "Why doesn't Grandma ever hug me like Mrs. Rodriguez does?" he asked me once after a visit, his voice small and confused. These questions broke my heart, but I tried to explain in age-appropriate ways that some people show love differently, while silently vowing that Noah would never question whether he was loved and valued by me. As his second-grade year progressed, Noah's asthma flare-ups became more frequent, possibly triggered by seasonal changes and the stress of a more demanding school year. Each episode meant days of missed school for him and missed work for me, straining both my limited sick leave and my standing at the company. These absences made me increasingly anxious about job security. As a single-income household with substantial medical expenses, we lived paycheck to paycheck with absolutely no financial cushion. Any disruption to that careful balance could send us into a spiral from which recovery would be nearly impossible. What I didn't realize was that a perfect storm was brewing, one that would force me to confront not only my financial vulnerability, but also the toxic family dynamics I'd been accepting as normal for far too long. After 5 years at Summit Marketing Group, I had settled into a familiar routine. My role as administrative assistant to Sandra Levy, the Director of Client Services, involved managing schedules, coordinating meetings, handling correspondence, and supporting various marketing projects. The work wasn't particularly exciting, but it was stable, offered decent health insurance for Noah, and Sandra was understanding about my occasional need for flexibility with Noah's health issues. My career advancement had been minimal, small annual raises that barely kept pace with inflation, and a title change from administrative assistant to executive administrative assistant that came with more responsibilities but negligible additional compensation. Still, I was grateful for the stability, even as I watched colleagues with fewer obligations climb the corporate ladder more quickly. Then came the email that changed everything. "Lillian, could you stop by my office before lunch?" Sandra asked one Tuesday morning in early October. Her tone was casual, but there was an undercurrent of excitement that piqued my curiosity. When I entered her office, she closed the door, something she rarely did for our quick check-ins. "I wanted to talk to you about an opportunity," she began, her normally reserved expression breaking into a smile. "Melissa from the executive team is leaving to relocate with her husband, and her position as executive assistant to the leadership team is opening up." My heart raced as she continued. "It's a significant step up. You'd be supporting the CEO and COO directly, as well as coordinating with the executive committee. The salary increase is substantial, about 30% more than your current position, plus better benefits and an annual performance bonus." 30%. The number echoed in my head, translating immediately into practical terms: a better apartment where Noah could have his own bedroom, the ability to take him to the asthma specialist, not covered by our current insurance plan, maybe even starting a small college fund. It would transform our financial reality. "I've already mentioned you to Alan," Sandra continued, referring to the CEO. "He remembers how well you handled the crisis during the Richardson account presentation. There will be a formal interview process, of course, but I want you to know I'm recommending you strongly." I left Sandra's office in a daze of hope and anxiety. This was the opportunity I'd been waiting for, the chance to finally get ahead instead of just treading water. But I was also acutely aware of the competition. Brad Thompson, another administrative assistant with fewer years at the company, but no childcare responsibilities, had been openly ambitious about moving up. And Cassandra in marketing operations had an MBA, something I'd always dreamed of pursuing but couldn't manage with my limited time and resources. Over the next 2 weeks, I poured every spare moment into preparing for the interview. I stayed late after Noah's bedtime to research the company's recent projects and executive priorities. I practiced answers to potential interview questions while doing laundry. I even spent a precious $120 on a new blazer and dress pants, an extravagance that made me feel guilty but seemed necessary for meeting with the executive team. Sandra helped where she could, providing insights into what Alan and the other executives would be looking for and giving feedback on my presentation. The final interview was scheduled for Friday at 10 a.m., a full panel with the CEO, COO, and HR director. "This is your moment, Lillian," Sandra told me the day before. "You've earned this opportunity. Just be confident and show them what I already know, that you're exactly what they need in this role." That night, I laid out my outfit, prepared my portfolio, and set multiple alarms to ensure I'd have plenty of time to get Noah to school before the interview. Everything was planned to perfection. Then at 2 a.m., I woke to the sound that every parent of an asthmatic child dreads, the distinctive wheezing gasp that signaled the beginning of an attack. Noah stood in the doorway of our shared bedroom, his pajama shirt damp with sweat, his breathing labored. "Mom," he managed between wheezes, "can't breathe good." I sprang into action with the practiced efficiency born from too many similar nights. Nebulizer assembled and medication added while guiding Noah to sit upright, coaching him through the slow breaths needed to get the medicine into his lungs. "You're doing great, buddy," I encouraged, hiding my concern behind a calm smile as I checked his oxygen levels with the small monitor we kept at home. Lower than I liked, but not yet in the danger zone that would necessitate a hospital trip. After 30 minutes, his breathing eased slightly, but I could tell this wasn't a mild episode. When he finally fell back asleep around 4 a.m., I sat watching the rise and fall of his chest, calculating hours and possibilities in my head. By morning, Noah had a fever of 101 degrees, and his breathing remained labored despite another nebulizer treatment. School was definitely out of the question. With a sinking feeling, I realized my carefully laid plans were unraveling. I called his pediatrician, who advised continuing the nebulizer treatments every 4 hours and monitoring his fever and oxygen levels closely. If his oxygen drops below 92 or the fever goes above 102, bring him to the ER immediately, she cautioned. Next, I called Mrs. Rodriguez, but her daughter answered and explained that she had taken her mother to a doctor's appointment. Amber was out of town at a marketing conference. The regular babysitter we occasionally used had classes all day. With each failed call, my desperation grew. With just 2 hours until my interview and running out of options, I made the call I'd been dreading. My mother answered on the fourth ring, her voice already holding a note of impatience. "Hello, Lillian." "What is it?" "We're just heading out for breakfast." "Mom, I'm in a really tight spot," I began, trying to keep the desperation from my voice. "Noah woke up with a bad asthma attack last night. He's running a fever and can't go to school, but I have an extremely important meeting at work today. It could mean a promotion with better pay and benefits that would really help us. Is there any way you and Dad could watch him just for a few hours?" The silence on the other end spoke volumes before she even responded. "Today, Lillian, you know we have plans. Why can't he just go to school? Children get colds all the time." "It's not a cold, Mom. It's his asthma, and it's serious. He needs someone to monitor his breathing and give him his nebulizer treatment. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't absolutely critical." I heard her muffled voice as she covered the phone to discuss with my father. Then she returned with the answer I'd been dreading. "We have brunch reservations at the Garden Terrace with the Hendersons, and then we're going to that new shopping center in Oakdale. We've been planning this all week." "Mom, please." I heard the pleading in my own voice and hated it. This promotion could change everything for us. The meeting is only 2 hours. I can drop him off with all his medications and instructions. "Lillian," her voice took on the condescending tone I knew too well, "we're not willing to sacrifice our weekend for this. You chose to become a mother, and these are the complications that come with that choice. You should have thought about these things before having a child so young." The familiar mixture of hurt, rage, and helplessness washed over me, but I made one last attempt. "I'll pay you," I offered, swallowing my pride completely. "Whatever you think is fair for your time." My mother's laugh was light but cutting. "Oh, Lillian, always so dramatic. Look, just call in sick to work." "That's what sick days are for. I'm sure whatever meeting it is can be rescheduled." In that moment, something crystallized inside me. The recognition that my parents would never prioritize my needs or Noah's welfare over even the most trivial of their own desires. A brunch and shopping trip outweighed a potentially life-changing opportunity for their daughter and grandson. "Right," I said, my voice suddenly calm. "Thanks anyway." I hung up before she could respond and stared at the phone in my hand, a strange sense of clarity cutting through my disappointment. Then I looked at Noah curled up on the couch with his favorite dinosaur plush, his breathing still wheezy, but his eyes following me with complete trust. The choice in the end wasn't really a choice at all. I called Sandra, explained the situation, and apologized profusely. To her credit, she was understanding, though I could hear the disappointment in her voice. "Family comes first," she said. "I'll explain to Alan and see if we can reschedule, though I can't promise anything with their packed calendars." We both knew what this meant. In corporate America, emergencies were understandable, but they were also inconvenient. The executives would likely proceed with the other candidates rather than delay their decision. As I hung up the phone, I felt the weight of what had just happened. My one shot at financial stability had slipped through my fingers because the two people who should have been my safety net had once again proven to be utterly unreliable. But as Noah called weakly for another drink of water, I pushed those thoughts aside. He needed me now, and unlike my parents, I would never let him down, no matter the cost to myself. The text came just after 2 p.m., while Noah was finally napping on the couch, his breathing somewhat improved after a day of consistent treatments. It was from Amber, who had apparently returned early from her conference. "Just heard about the EA position. Brad got it. I'm so sorry, Lillian. Let me know if you want to talk." I stared at the message, a hollow feeling spreading through my chest. Brad Thompson, with 3 years less experience than me and a reputation for taking credit for others' work. The unfairness of it burned, but what hurt more was knowing it wasn't about qualifications. It was simply about who was able to show up. When Noah woke, he must have seen something in my expression because he immediately looked concerned. "Are you okay, Mom?" I forced a smile. "Just a little tired, buddy. How are you feeling?" He shrugged, then his face crumpled with unexpected tears. "I'm sorry I got sick and made you miss your important meeting." My heart shattered. Of course he had picked up on the significance of the day despite my efforts to shield him from my disappointment. I moved to the couch and pulled him gently into my arms, mindful of his still labored breathing. "Noah James Walker, listen to me," I said firmly. "You have absolutely nothing to be sorry for. Getting sick is not your fault, and taking care of you is the most important job I have. Always." "But your meeting," he sniffled. "You said it was for a better job with more money." "There will be other opportunities," I assured him, though I wasn't sure I believed it. "What matters is that you're getting better. Nothing is more important than that." He seemed to accept this, but after a moment asked the question I'd been dreading. "Why didn't Grandma and Grandpa come help us? Don't they care if I'm sick?" How do you explain toxic family dynamics to a 7-year-old? How do you help them understand conditional love without damaging their sense of self-worth? "Grandma and Grandpa do care about you," I began carefully. "But sometimes adults don't always make the best choices about how to show it. They had plans they didn't want to change." Noah considered this, his young face surprisingly thoughtful. "But you always change your plans when I need help. Like when you missed your book club when I had that big project due." "That's what parents are supposed to do," I explained. "When you have a child, they become your priority." "So why do we help Grandma and Grandpa so much if they don't help us?" He asked, his innocent question cutting straight to the heart of the dysfunctional pattern I'd maintained for years. I had no good answer. The question hung in the air between us, challenging the narrative I'd been telling myself about family obligation and Noah's need for grandparents. For the first time, I considered the possibility that maintaining a relationship with people who consistently devalued us might actually be harmful to Noah rather than beneficial. That evening, as Noah's fever finally broke and his breathing became more regular, I sat at our small kitchen table paying bills while he watched a dinosaur documentary. The familiar anxiety tightened my chest as I juggled numbers, trying to make our budget stretch to cover everything. Without the promotion, we remained firmly on the financial edge, one emergency away from disaster. On Monday, I returned to work with a heavy heart. Brad's smug smile as he packed his things to move to his new office on the executive floor was almost unbearable, but I congratulated him with all the grace I could muster. Later that afternoon, Sandra called me into her office. "I wanted to check on Noah," she said kindly. "Is he feeling better?" "Much better, thank you. Back at school today." She nodded, then leaned forward. "Lillian, I want you to know that I fought for you in that meeting. I told them we should reschedule, that your circumstances were exceptional." "I appreciate that," I said, though it did little to ease the disappointment. "Alan was impressed with your resume and my recommendation," she continued. "He mentioned that while this position has been filled, there's a new client services coordinator role opening up next quarter. It would be a step up from your current position with better pay. Not as much as the EA role, but still an improvement." Hope flickered faintly. "Do you think I'd have a chance?" "More than a chance. I've already put your name forward. But Lillian," she hesitated, "I need to be honest with you. One of the concerns raised was about your availability given your son's health issues. They need someone who can be consistently present. The familiar sting of single-parent discrimination hit hard, but I appreciated her candor. I understand, I replied, and I'm working on building a more reliable support system. As I walked back to my desk, the irony wasn't lost on me. I needed better childcare support to advance professionally, but without professional advancement, I couldn't afford better childcare. It was a cycle that countless single parents found themselves trapped in. But beneath the frustration, something else was taking root. A quiet, smoldering anger directed not at the unfair system, but at the two people who could have easily helped break that cycle with a few hours of their precious time. Two people who had consistently taken from me while giving little in return. As I drove to pick up Noah from after-school care that evening, I began mentally cataloging all the ways I'd supported my parents over the years, despite their minimal reciprocation. The list was longer than I'd realized, and with each remembered instance my determination grew. Something needed to change, not just for my sake, but for Noah's. The pattern of one-sided support had been established so gradually that I'd normalized it without realizing how unbalanced it had become. As I reflected over the weekend after the missed interview, specific instances came flooding back with painful clarity. 3 years ago, my mother had minor knee surgery, an arthroscopic procedure that required minimal recovery time. Yet somehow I ended up driving her to weekly hair appointments for nearly 4 months because she didn't feel comfortable driving yet, despite her doctor clearing her after 2 weeks. Each Saturday morning meant rearranging Noah's activities and listening to her critique my car's cleanliness and my driving skills. Every April for the past 6 years, I'd spent multiple evenings helping my father organize his tax documents and navigate the tax preparation software he refused to upgrade or learn properly. "You're good with computers," he'd say, as if my basic office skills made me an IT specialist. These sessions inevitably ran late, requiring me to pay extra to the babysitter and face Noah's disappointment at missing our bedtime routine. Then there were the countless small errands. Picking up prescriptions when they didn't feel like driving to that part of town. Grocery shopping when the weather was too unpleasant for them to go out. House sitting during their frequent weekend getaways and vacations, which often meant dragging Noah to their house to water plants and collect mail rather than enjoying our limited free time together. Technology support had become practically a part-time job. Every new device program update or password reset generated multiple phone calls, often during my workday or Noah's homework time. "It's just a quick question," my mother would insist before keeping me on the phone for 45 minutes, troubleshooting her email settings. Home repairs and maintenance tasks regularly fell to me as well. My father, though perfectly capable, had decided that certain tasks were too much trouble now that he was retired. Changing highlight bulbs, assembling furniture, and even unclogging drains somehow became my responsibility during our visits, while Noah entertained himself and my parents relaxed. What struck me most as I cataloged these impositions was the stark contrast in how they treated Noah's birthday versus their own expectations. For Noah's 7th birthday, they had given him a $10 action figure from the discount store unwrapped and in the original plastic bag. Yet for my mother's birthday, the previous month, I had spent nearly $200 on the designer scarf she had pointedly mentioned wanting carefully gift-wrapped with a handmade card from Noah. Their complaints about my messy one-bedroom apartment were particularly galling, considering they had never once offered to help with childcare, to give me time to deep clean, or suggested contributing to a larger place where we wouldn't be so cramped. My father had actually referred to my administrative position as just answering phones in front of Noah, undermining both my professional contributions and the work ethic I was trying to instill in my son. The pattern was unmistakable. They called with demands, but never with offers of help. They expected priority in my schedule while treating my needs as inconveniences. They criticized my parenting while offering minimal support to their only grandchild. Most painful were my mother's backhanded compliments about my parenting. "It's surprising how well Noah is turning out given the circumstances," she'd remark at family gatherings as if my single parenthood was a deficiency I'd somehow managed to overcome, rather than a challenge I navigated daily with love and dedication. As these realizations crystallized, I began to see our relationship through Noah's eyes. What was he learning from watching his mother constantly accommodate people who gave so little in return? What message was he internalizing about his own worth when his grandparents treated him as an afterthought? The Monday after Noah recovered, I returned to our normal routine with a heavy heart but growing resolve. Brad Thompson had already moved to his new office on the executive floor, a visible reminder of the opportunity I'd lost. But something had shifted inside me, a newfound clarity about boundaries and reciprocity that I couldn't unlearn. I was so distracted by these thoughts that I almost missed the warning light on my car dashboard during the drive home. The engine made an ominous knocking sound as I pulled into our apartment complex parking lot. "What's that noise, Mom?" Noah asked, looking up from his dinosaur book. "I'm not sure, buddy," I replied, trying to mask my concern. "Probably nothing serious." But the next morning, the car wouldn't start at all. After calling a tow truck and arranging emergency transportation to get Noah to school and myself to work, I received the mechanic's verdict with a growing sense of dread. "The timing belt's gone and it's damaged the engine," Mike explained apologetically. "In this model, when the belt goes, it usually takes out some valves with it. You're looking at about $800 for parts and labor." $800. The number might as well have been 8 million for how achievable it felt in that moment. I had exactly $327 in my checking account with rent due in 2 weeks and Noah's prescription refills needed before then. How long would the repair take? I asked, mind racing through impossible calculations. 3 days to get the parts, then about a day of labor, Mike said. But listen, I know you're in a bind. We can work out a payment plan if that helps. I thanked him and accepted the offer, though even stretched payments would strain our already tight budget to the breaking point. Public transportation to work was possible, but would add nearly 2 hours to my daily commute. Noah's school was too far to walk, especially with his asthma. That evening, after putting Noah to bed, I sat at our small kitchen table staring at our budget spreadsheet. No matter how I moved the numbers around, I couldn't make them work. After an hour of increasingly desperate calculations, I reached for my phone and did something I'd sworn I wouldn't do again after the promotion debacle. I called my parents. My father answered, his voice distracted as a golf tournament played in the background. "Dad, I'm sorry to bother you." I began, hating the apologetic tone that automatically crept into my voice. "But I'm in a really difficult situation. My car's timing belt broke and damaged the engine. The repair is $800 and I just don't have it right now. I was wondering if I could possibly borrow the money and pay you back in installments over the next few months." The silence on the other end lasted several seconds too long. "That's quite a sum, Lillian," he finally said. "What about your savings emergency fund?" I swallowed hard. Between Noah's medical expenses and everyday costs, I haven't been able to build much savings. "I'm working on it, but—" "This is exactly what your mother and I worry about," he interrupted. "Your financial planning has always been concerning. $800 should be manageable for someone your age." I bit back a sharp response about how his generation hadn't faced the same housing costs, student loans, and medical expenses that mine did. "I understand, but right now I really need help. I can sign something agreeing to repayment terms." "Well," he sighed heavily, "our budget is pretty tight this quarter. We just put down deposits for that Alaskan cruise in the spring, and the new patio furniture arrived last week." My parents' tight budget included luxury cruises and patio renovations, while I was calculating whether I could delay Noah's non-emergency medications by a few days to buy groceries. "Your mother and I have worked hard for our retirement," he continued. "We can't just bail you out every time you have a financial setback." "It's about responsibility, Lillian. Maybe this is a good lesson about the importance of financial planning." The condescension in his tone was the final straw after years of similar lectures. Lectures delivered from the comfort of financial security they'd never shared with their only child and grandchild. "I understand," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Thanks anyway." I hung up before he could launch into the familiar lecture about my poor life choices. Sitting in the quiet apartment, I felt something shift inside me. Not the usual hurt and disappointment, but a cold clarity about the true nature of our relationship. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. Just hours after being denied basic financial help during a genuine emergency, my phone rang with my mother's distinct ringtone. "Lillian, thank goodness you answered," she said without preamble. "We've been trying to set up that new smart TV system Robert bought and we can't figure it out. Can you come over tomorrow after work and get it connected? The instruction manual is just impossible to understand." The audacity was breathtaking. Unable to help with a critical financial emergency, yet expecting immediate technical support for a luxury purchase. "Actually, Mom, I can't," I replied, surprising myself with my calm tone. "I'm dealing with car troubles right now and I don't have transportation to get to your house." "Oh, that's right. Your father mentioned something about car problems. Well, can you at least walk us through it over the phone? The Thompsons are coming over this weekend for the game and we wanted to use the new screen." I took a deep breath, feeling a strange sense of liberation as I prepared to say words I'd never dared speak before. "I'm sorry, but I won't be able to help with the TV. I'm in a difficult financial situation right now because of my car repairs, and I need to focus on solving that problem. Since you weren't able to help me, I don't think it's fair to expect me to help with your entertainment system." The silence on the other end was deafening. "I don't understand," my mother finally said, her voice chilled. "What does one thing have to do with the other? After everything we've done for you and Noah over the years, this is your attitude." "What exactly have you done for us, Mom?" I asked quietly. "When was the last time you helped without complaints or conditions? When Noah was sick and I needed you most, you chose brunch over us. So yes, I think one thing has very much to do with the other." "Well," she exclaimed, clearly shocked by my unprecedented rebellion, "I never thought I'd see the day when you'd be so ungrateful. If this is how you feel, perhaps we should reconsider how much we do for you." A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. A genuine, if slightly bitter laugh at the emptiness of her threat. "That might be best," I agreed. "I won't be available to help anymore until you can respect me and my son." I ended the call before she could respond, my heart racing, but my mind surprisingly clear. In the silence of our small apartment with Noah sleeping peacefully in the next room, I realized I had finally spoken a truth that had been building for years. A soft sound from the hallway caught my attention. Noah stood in the doorway in his dinosaur pajamas, his expression troubled. "Mom, why were you talking to Grandma like that? You sounded mad." My heart sank. "I'm sorry you heard that, sweetheart. Come here." I patted the couch beside me, and he climbed up his small body warm against mine. Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements about how they treat each other. "Is Grandma being mean again?" he asked with the directness only children can manage. "It's complicated." I began, then stopped myself. Perhaps honesty carefully framed was better than evasion. "Grandma and Grandpa haven't been very helpful when we really needed them, and that's not how families are supposed to treat each other." Noah nodded seriously. "Like when they wouldn't come over when I was sick, even though you always helped them with their computer and stuff." His perception startled me. He had noticed the imbalance, had been processing it in his own way all along. "Exactly like that," I confirmed. "And I decided it's time for that to change." "Good," he said, simply leaning his head against my shoulder. "They make you sad a lot." Out of the mouths of babes. In that moment, with my son's innocent observation, the last of my doubt fell away. The relationship I'd been preserving at all costs wasn't just harmful to me, it was affecting Noah too. He deserved to see his mother valued and respected, not constantly diminished. As I tucked him back into bed, I realized that the hardest step, acknowledging the toxic pattern, was already behind me. Now came the challenge of actually changing it. A week of blessed silence from my parents followed my unprecedented boundary setting. I scrambled to manage our transportation crisis, arranging carpools with Amber and borrowing a neighbor's car for essential errands, while the repairs proceeded on a payment plan that would strain our budget for months. Just as I was beginning to wonder if my parents had actually accepted my new boundaries, they appeared at our apartment door unannounced on Sunday afternoon. Noah was at a playdate with a school friend, giving me a rare few hours to catch up on laundry and meal prep for the week. The knock startled me, and when I opened the door to find my parents standing there, I felt an immediate tension headache begin at my temples. "Mom, Dad, this is unexpected." I didn't invite them in immediately, a small act of assertion that didn't go unnoticed. "Well, we tried calling, but you didn't answer," my mother said with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "May we come in? We brought something for Noah." I stepped aside, reluctantly watching as they entered and surveyed my apartment with the same critical gaze I'd endured for years. My father held a small gift bag from the dollar store, the tissue paper hastily stuffed inside. "Noah's at a friend's house," I informed them, remaining standing as they settled themselves on my couch without invitation. "What brings you by?" The directness of my question clearly surprised them. Usually, I would have offered drinks, apologized for the apartment's state, and generally assumed the role of anxious hostess. "We've been thinking about our conversation last week," my mother began, her voice taking on the reasonable tone she used when attempting to manage a situation. "And while we think you were quite rude, we understand you've been under stress with your car troubles." I waited, not filling the silence with the apology she clearly expected. My father cleared his throat. "Actually, Lillian, we've come with some news we think you'll find exciting. We've made a decision that could help with your financial situation." Something in his tone set off warning bells, but I nodded for him to continue. "As you know, we've been thinking about downsizing for a while. The house is really too big for just the two of us now that we're retired. We've decided to sell and move to that new adult community in Ridgeview." "I see," I said carefully. "That makes sense for your lifestyle." "Here's where it gets interesting for you," my mother interjected, leaning forward with an expression I recognized, the one she wore when she thought she was being generous while actually serving her own interests. "The units at Ridgeview are much smaller than our current house. We were thinking that you and Noah could move into our basement. It's practically a separate apartment with the bathroom and kitchenette we added for your grandfather." I blinked, trying to process what she was suggesting. "You want us to live in your basement?" "It would be perfect," she continued enthusiastically. "You'd save on rent, and we'd have help around the house. You could handle the lawn care and snow removal that's getting difficult for your father, and I could use some help with the deeper cleaning. Plus, I'm sure Noah would love being closer to his grandparents." The arrangement became clearer with each word. They weren't offering help. They were proposing an arrangement where I would become their live-in caretaker and property manager while continuing to pay them for the privilege. "And what about rent?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Well, we'd expect a reasonable contribution for utilities and such," my father explained. "Nothing close to what you're paying now, of course. Maybe $500 a month. That seems more than fair considering market rates. $500 for a basement plus unpaid labor maintaining their property." The audacity was almost impressive. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but I don't think that would work for us. Noah needs his own space as he grows, and I value our independence." Their expressions shifted simultaneously from confident to confused, then quickly to offended. "Independence," my mother repeated incredulously. "Lillian, you can barely make ends meet. This is a practical solution that benefits everyone." "It primarily benefits you," I corrected gently. "You get household help and extra income while maintaining control over my life. That's not the arrangement I'm looking for." My father's face reddened. "After everything we've done for you, this is your response to our generosity. We're offering you a lifeline here." "No," I said with a clarity that surprised even me. "You're offering me a role as your caretaker with the illusion of financial help. If you genuinely wanted to help, you would have loaned me the money for my car repair." A tense silence fell over the room. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line before she spoke again. "Well, if you're going to reject our help, perhaps we need to be more direct. Your father and I are getting older, Lillian. We've supported you throughout your poor choices, and now it's time for you to support us." "What exactly does that mean?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "It means," my father interjected, "that if you won't accept our offer to move in and help with the property, we expect regular financial contributions for our retirement. We've sacrificed a lot for you over the years, and it's time you showed some appreciation." The pieces finally fell into place. This wasn't about helping me at all. With retirement realities setting in, they were looking for ways to supplement their income and reduce their responsibilities. And I was the most convenient solution. "Let me understand," I said slowly. "You refuse to loan me $800 for an essential car repair that affects my ability to work and care for Noah. Then you came here to propose I become your housekeeper in exchange for living in your basement. And now that I've declined, you're demanding financial support for your retirement." "Don't be dramatic, Lillian," my mother sighed. "We're simply asking for the normal support any child would provide their aging parents." Before I could respond, the door opened and Noah burst in, cheeks flushed from playing outside. He stopped short when he saw my parents, his usual enthusiasm noticeably dimming. "Hi, Grandma. Hi, Grandpa," he said cautiously, coming to stand beside me. My mother's demeanor shifted instantly to the saccharine tone she reserved for public displays of grandmotherly affection. "Noah, look how messy you are. Have you been rolling in dirt?" Noah looked down at his jeans, which had grass stains from playing soccer. "We were playing at the park," he explained. "Well, we brought you a little something," my father said, holding out the gift bag with decidedly less enthusiasm than when they'd arrived. Noah accepted it politely and peered inside, pulling out a plastic dinosaur figure, the exact same one they had given him for his birthday 6 months earlier. His confused expression broke my heart. "Thank you," he said automatically, though his eyes sought mine with a question he was too polite to ask. "Noah, why don't you go wash up while I finish talking with Grandma and Grandpa?" I suggested, giving his shoulder a reassuring squeeze. As soon as he was out of earshot, my mother leaned forward. "See how untidy he looks. This is exactly why you need more supervision in your parenting. In our home, we could ensure he's properly presented at all times." Something in me snapped at her criticism of my child. "Noah looks like a normal 7-year-old who has been playing outside with friends. That's healthy and exactly what he should be doing." "There's no need to get defensive," she replied. "We're only thinking of what's best for him." "No, you're thinking of what's most convenient for you," I corrected. "And I think this conversation has run its course. Noah and I won't be moving into your basement, and I won't be providing financial support for your retirement. You made your priorities clear when you chose brunch over helping us in a crisis." My father stood abruptly. "This is outrageous. After everything we've sacrificed for you, this is your attitude. Fine. Don't come crying to us the next time you're in financial trouble." "I won't," I assured him calmly. "I've learned that lesson." As they gathered their coats, my mother delivered her parting shot. "You'll regret turning your back on family, Lillian. Blood is thicker than water." "You're right about one thing," I replied as I opened the door. "Family is important. That's why I'm prioritizing the family I created, Noah and me, over people who see us as nothing more than resources to be exploited." After they left, I leaned against the closed door, my heart racing but my mind surprisingly clear. Noah emerged cautiously from the hallway. "Are they gone?" he asked in a small voice. "Yes, sweetheart. They're gone." He came to stand beside me, leaning against my side. "They gave me the same dinosaur as last time," he observed. I noticed that. "And Grandma didn't like my clothes." I knelt down to his level, looking into his thoughtful brown eyes. "Noah, I want you to listen to me carefully. There is absolutely nothing wrong with how you look. Playing outside and getting a little messy is part of being a kid." He nodded, then asked the question that had clearly been bothering him. "Why are Grandma and Grandpa always so mean?" There it was, the simple truth that I had been dancing around for years, trying to frame in ways that wouldn't damage his self-esteem or understanding of family. But perhaps honesty carefully delivered was what he needed most. "Some people," I began carefully, "even adults, even family members, don't know how to be kind or generous. They think mostly about themselves and what they want, not about how their words and actions affect others. Like when they wouldn't help when I was sick. Exactly like that." He considered this, his face serious beyond his years. "So what do we do?" What indeed? The question hung between us, simple yet profound. "We make a choice," I finally answered. We can keep trying to make them happy even though it hurts us. Or we can choose to spend our time and love on people who care about us in return. Like Mrs. Rodriguez and Amber. Like them, I confirmed with a smile. And each other. We're a team, you and me. He nodded solemnly, then wrapped his arms around my neck in a fierce hug. I choose us, he whispered. Me too, buddy, I whispered back, holding him close. Me too. That night after Noah was asleep, I sat at our small kitchen table with a notepad calculating options. The confrontation with my parents had been painful but clarifying. For years, I had maintained the relationship out of a mixture of obligation, habit, and the hope that Noah would benefit from having grandparents in his life. But the reality had become impossible to ignore. Their presence was more harmful than helpful both practically and emotionally. What we needed was a fresh start away from their toxic influence and manipulative demands. A place where we could build our own definition of family based on mutual respect and genuine care. Looking at our budget, I knew it would be tight, nearly impossible in fact, but something had shifted inside me, a determination that outweighed the practical obstacles. With newfound resolve, I began researching apartments in neighborhoods further from my parents' home, starting the process that would ultimately lead us toward freedom, even if I wasn't yet sure how we'd get there. In the 3 months following my confrontation with my parents, life took unexpected turns that gradually reshaped our reality. The first few weeks were the hardest, with my parents alternating between angry messages demanding I come to my senses and manipulative attempts to regain control through false health scares and financial threats. I maintained minimal contact, responding only to direct questions with brief factual answers. When my mother claimed she had concerning test results that turned out to be routine blood work showing slightly elevated cholesterol, I simply recommended she follow her doctor's advice, rather than rushing to her side as I would have previously. My car was finally repaired, straining our budget but restoring our mobility. At work, Sandra continued to mentor me, involving me in projects that would strengthen my candidacy for the Client Services Coordinator position opening up in the next quarter. Your attention to detail on the Henderson campaign materials was noticed by the executive team, she mentioned one afternoon. Alan specifically asked who had caught the discrepancy in the presentation data. These small professional victories helped bolster my confidence as I navigated our new family dynamics. Noah, to my surprise, seemed to thrive in the absence of his grandparents' subtle criticisms. His asthma episodes became less frequent, which his pediatrician suggested might be connected to reduced emotional stress. Anxiety can be a significant trigger for asthmatic children, Dr. Patel explained during Noah's checkup. Environmental factors are important, but never underestimate the impact of emotional well-being on physical health. Our support network, though small, proved more reliable than I had ever given it credit for. Mrs. Rodriguez, our elderly neighbor, became a regular presence in our lives, sharing her Cuban cooking and wisdom, while occasionally watching Noah when I needed to work late. Amber from work introduced me to a single-parent support group that met monthly, providing both practical advice and emotional validation I hadn't realized I'd been missing. The most unexpected support came from my mother's sister, Aunt Claire, who called after receiving a confusing and accusatory email from my mother about my abandonment of the family. Lillian, I hope you don't mind me reaching out, she began tentatively. Martha sent the family a rather concerning email about your relationship, and I wanted to hear your side. I hadn't spoken to Aunt Claire in years. My mother had effectively controlled family communication, filtering what information reached the extended family. Speaking openly about the situation felt both frightening and liberating. The short version is that I finally set boundaries after years of one-sided support. I explained, giving her a few specific examples without bitterness. Her sigh was heavy with recognition. I was afraid of that. Martha has always had a talent for rewriting history to cast herself as the victim. What she's describing doesn't sound like the thoughtful niece I remember. That conversation opened a door I hadn't known existed. Aunt Claire, who lived in Colorado, had been experiencing her own version of my mother's manipulative behavior for decades. Our reconnection provided perspective and validation that helped strengthen my resolve during moments of doubt. By the 6th month of our new boundaries, I had saved enough for the security deposit on a small apartment in a neighborhood across town, further from my parents but closer to Noah's school and my office. The rent would stretch our budget to the absolute limit, but the complex had a small playground, and most importantly was outside my parents' sphere of immediate influence. I hadn't shared our moving plans with my parents, but they discovered them anyway, through a mutual acquaintance. This prompted the most desperate attempt yet to regain control, a tearful phone call from my mother late one evening. "Lillian, we need to talk," she began, her voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. "Your father and I have been doing some thinking, and we realize we may have been too harsh." I remained silent, waiting. "The thing is," she continued, "we're facing some financial difficulties. The stock market hasn't been kind to our retirement accounts, and the house isn't selling as quickly as we hoped." "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied neutrally. "We were wondering if we could come to some arrangement," she suggested, her voice taking on the wheedling tone I recognized from previous manipulations. "We've reconsidered our basement offer. Perhaps you could move in rent-free in exchange for just a few household responsibilities." The timing of this sudden generosity, coinciding perfectly with my plans to move further away, was too convenient to be coincidental. "That's a kind offer, Mom, but Noah and I have already signed a lease on a new apartment." The silence on the other end was brief but telling. When she spoke again, the vulnerable tone had vanished entirely. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us, by moving even further away when we need you. What kind of daughter are you?" "One who has finally learned the difference between genuine family support and conditional manipulation," I answered calmly. "I wish you and Dad well with your financial situation, but Noah and I need to prioritize our well-being." The conversation ended with her hanging up abruptly, followed by a barrage of text messages from my father, alternating between guilt trips and financial threats. I read them once, then silently blocked both their numbers, at least temporarily. The peace that followed was both sad and necessary. Moving day arrived with unexpected sunshine after a week of spring rain. Amber and two other colleagues from work helped load the small moving truck I'd rented, while Mrs. Rodriguez watched Noah and prepared a new home meal for us to enjoy that evening. As we carried the last boxes out, Noah stood in the empty living room, his expression contemplative. "What are you thinking about, buddy?" I asked, kneeling beside him. "Will Grandma and Grandpa know where we live now?" The question caught me off guard. "Not right away. Do you want them to know?" He considered this seriously. "Not yet. Maybe later when they learn to be nicer." The wisdom in his simple statement brought tears to my eyes. That's exactly right. This isn't about punishing them. It's about giving us space until they can treat us with respect. He nodded, apparently satisfied with this explanation, then brightened. "Can I have dinosaur stickers on my new bedroom wall?" "Absolutely." I laughed, grateful for his resilience and ability to focus on the positive aspects of our change. That night, after the helpers had left and Noah was tucked into his new bedroom, complete with promises of dinosaur decor to come, I stood in our small kitchen unpacking essential items by the light of a single lamp. The apartment was modest but clean, with a tiny balcony overlooking a community garden. Noah's room, though small, was his alone, the first time he'd had his own dedicated space. As I arranged dishes in the cupboards, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was from my father using my mother's phone to bypass my block. "You'll regret shutting us out when you need help again. Family is forever, Lillian. You can't just walk away." I stared at the message, feeling the familiar twist of guilt and obligation he intended to provoke. Then I looked around at our new home, modest but ours, a space where we could define family on our own terms. I deleted the message without responding and continued unpacking each item placed, representing another small step toward independence. Later, checking on Noah before I went to bed, I found him sleeping peacefully, his favorite dinosaur plush tucked under his arm, and his breathing mercifully even and unlabored. In the quiet of our new beginning, I made a silent promise to both of us our definition of family would be built on respect, mutual support, and unconditional love, not obligation, guilt, or convenience. The path forward wouldn't be easy, Financial challenges remained, and the emotional work of setting boundaries was ongoing. But for the first time in years, perhaps ever, I felt the lightness of authenticity, of choices made from strength rather than fear, of priorities aligned with our true needs rather than others' expectations. As I closed Noah's door, leaving it open, just a crack, the way he liked, I realized the most important lesson of our journey: sometimes walking away isn't abandonment, but self-preservation. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do for yourself and your child is to redefine family on your own terms. 2 years have passed since that pivotal moment when my parents refused to watch Noah during my promotion interview. In ways I could never have predicted, that painful rejection became the catalyst for transformation in nearly every aspect of our lives. The client services coordinator position did eventually open up, and with Sandra's continued mentorship and my growing confidence, I secured the role. The salary increase, while not dramatic, provided just enough breathing room in our budget to build a small emergency fund for the first time in Noah's life. Noah, now 9, has flourished in the absence of toxic criticism. His asthma, while still requiring management, has stabilized significantly. Dr. Patel confirmed what I had suspected: the reduction in emotional stress has had measurable benefits for his physical health. He's maintained his natural compassion while developing a healthy sense of boundaries, often astounding me with his emotional intelligence. "Mom," he said recently after a playdate with a friend whose parents were divorcing, "I told Jamie it's okay to feel sad about his parents, but it's not his job to make them happy again. That's what you taught me, right?" Our support network has expanded in unexpected ways. The single parents group introduced me to Jessica, another mother with a child Noah's age, who has become both friend and backup childcare when needed. Mrs. Rodriguez, despite moving to an assisted living facility last year, still insists on monthly dinners where she teaches Noah to cook traditional Cuban dishes. Most surprisingly, Aunt Claire moved from Colorado to a town just 30 minutes away after her own retirement, providing Noah with the healthy, loving grandparent figure he deserves. Their bond developed naturally and joyfully, without the manipulation and criticism that characterized his relationship with my parents. My relationship with my parents remains complicated. After 6 months of minimal contact, they made tentative attempts at reconciliation, driven, I suspect, by the realization that their other relationships were similarly strained. Our current interaction is limited to occasional supervised visits in neutral locations, like parks or restaurants, with clear boundaries that I enforce without apology. "I don't understand why we can't just come to your apartment," my mother complained during a recent meeting at a local cafe. "What are you hiding?" "I'm not hiding anything, Mom," I explained calmly. "I'm maintaining boundaries that work for Noah and me. Our home is our safe space." These interactions remain challenging, with frequent attempts to push boundaries or revert to old patterns. My father still occasionally makes comments about financial support, though, with notably less conviction than before. My mother's criticism has become more subtle, but hasn't disappeared entirely. What has changed is my response. Where once I would have absorbed their comments, made excuses, or attempted to please them, I now acknowledge the behavior directly. "That comment is exactly why our time together needs to be limited." Or simply, "If you continue speaking to Noah that way, we'll need to end this visit." The most profound change, however, has been internal. The constant anxiety that once characterized my days has diminished dramatically. The reflexive guilt that accompanied any act of self-care has faded. In its place has grown a quiet confidence in my decisions and priorities. Last month, I received an unexpected opportunity: a promotion to account manager with a significant salary increase that would allow us to consider buying a small home rather than continuing to rent. The interview was scheduled during Noah's spring break. "I can watch him," Aunt Claire offered immediately when I mentioned the scheduling conflict. "We'll have a wonderful time." As I prepared for the interview, I realized the stark contrast to that pivotal day 2 years ago. Now I had reliable support. Now I could pursue professional opportunities without sacrificing my child's well-being. Now I understood that genuine family doesn't make you choose. I got the promotion. The day I received the offer, Noah and I celebrated with a special dinner complete with ice cream sundaes and his favorite dinosaur documentary. "I'm really proud of you, Mom," he said, his expression serious beyond his years. "You work so hard for us." "We're a team," I reminded him, our standard affirmation. He nodded, then asked the question that had clearly been on his mind. "Do you think Grandma and Grandpa will ever be part of our team for real?" The honesty of children, direct and unflinching. "I don't know, buddy," I answered truthfully. "They would need to make some big changes in how they treat people. But what I do know is that we have built an amazing team with people who truly care about us." He seemed to accept this, returning to his ice cream with the resilience that continually amazes me. Later that night, after he was asleep, I received a text from my mother. "Heard about your promotion from Claire. Congratulations. Your father and I are proud of you." The message was simple, without the usual manipulation or backhanded compliments. Perhaps it represented a small step toward genuine change, or perhaps it was just another attempt to maintain connection on their terms. Either way, I could receive it with equanimity rather than desperate hope or cynical dismissal. I responded with a simple, "Thank you," maintaining the boundary while acknowledging the positive gesture. It was neither a reconciliation nor a rejection, but rather an honest interaction between adults with a complicated shared history. As I prepare for our move to a small house with a yard where Noah can play freely, I reflect on the journey that brought us here. The path hasn't been straight or easy. There have been financial struggles, moments of doubt, and the ongoing grief of family relationships that may never be what I once hoped. Yet through it all, Noah and I have built something precious and real. A family defined not by blood or obligation, but by respect, support, and unconditional love. We've created a home where boundaries are honored, where mistakes are met with compassion rather than criticism, where joy is celebrated and challenges are faced together. The greatest lesson of our journey has been that family is not a static entity defined by genetics or tradition. It's a dynamic, chosen relationship that requires continuous nurturing and mutual respect. Sometimes preserving the essence of family means walking away from those who cannot or will not honor its true meaning. For those of you watching who may be struggling with similar challenges, I want you to know that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's an act of courage and love, especially when you're protecting not just yourself, but a child who looks to you for guidance. The path forward isn't about cutting people off permanently, but about creating enough distance to build a healthier foundation, whether that eventually includes reconciliation or not. Have you faced similar challenges with family boundaries? How did you navigate them? Please share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support more conversations about these difficult but important topics. Also, don't forget to share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to prioritize their well-being and their children's needs, even when facing family pressure. Thank you for being part of this journey with me, and remember, sometimes the family we build is stronger than the family we're born into.